Okay, this video simply is meant to show you for your mug and plate project what your options are for a foot or feet on the bottom to make sure that air passes underneath. Now in Ceramics 1, you should have learned the traditional coil foot on your pinch pot. And a coil foot looks something like this, where you have added a coil and you've slipped and scored it on and you've blended it on, and it very clearly has a way for air to pass underneath. So that is always an option. Oftentimes though, students say, well, Ms. D, I don't want there to be this kind of big annoying coil at the bottom, especially for a mug. What are my options for air to pass underneath so that I don't have to add a coil on the bottom? Now, there's a couple things you could do. One is that you could remove some clay. So you could use a loop tool or a cookie cutter or something and just carve a little bit in some way that air could pass underneath. But one of my favorite techniques for a mug is to simply take a sponge. So let's assume that this is my mug. I'm making a pumpkin here in Ceramics 1 for their pinch pot. But let's assume this is my pumpkin mug. One thing I like to do, and I always encourage to clean up the bottoms really good because it always makes it look a little bit more finished. But what I like to do is I like to use my thumb and the edge of my thumb, and I just gently push in a circular motion. And you can see it's not changing the shape too much. All it's doing is creating kind of a valley of sorts that air can ultimately pass underneath. So it doesn't need to be dramatic for it to be effective. So you could see here on an edge, it just goes in slightly and then comes back out. No need for a big coil foot, no need for major carving if you don't want it. You could simply kind of push in. You could do that with your thumb. You could even do it with the sponge. So sometimes I kind of just like to push in and pull a little bit and create this sort of indent of sorts. And you can see how you could clean it up the whole time you're doing it. Nice indent. And that will be sufficient enough for your mugs and your plates for air to pass underneath so that your project doesn't explode in the kiln. One other reminder, make sure that you have your name and period number carved on all of your pieces. You'll want your first initial, last name, and period number, or your first name, last initial, and period number. Your period number is important to make sure it gets to the right place on our patio so that you could ultimately retrieve your project. And that is a project requirement for all of your pieces.